Welcome to Fatal Crime Investigation. Kindly like and subscribe to this channel for more crime stories. It was nearly 2:13 in the morning when Margaret Hill heard the front door creak open. At first, she thought it was the wind. The old wooden house had made strange noises for years. Pipes rattled. Floorboards groaned. The roof whispered during heavy rain. But this sound was different. Slow, careful, like someone trying not to be heard. Margaret slowly opened her eyes inside her dark bedroom. The television downstairs was still glowing faintly blue from where she had fallen asleep earlier that night. Then she heard it again. Heavy footsteps. Dragging. Not walking. Dragging. And suddenly, her stomach tightened. Because her son, Tyler, wasn't supposed to be home. Earlier that evening, the 24-year-old had texted her saying he would stay out with friends. But now, someone was inside the house. Margaret slowly sat up in bed. The digital clock beside her flashed 2:14 a.m. Outside, rain slammed against the windows while thunder rolled across the neighborhood. The entire house felt wrong. Quiet. Too quiet. Then came another sound. A wet thud from downstairs. Margaret's breathing became shallow. "Tyler," she called softly. No response. Just a silence. Then another dragging sound, closer this time, and that's when Margaret noticed something horrifying beneath her bedroom door. A shadow, moving slowly across the hallway. She froze. Every instinct in her body screamed not to move. But a mother's mind always searches for explanations before fear. Maybe Tyler was drunk. Maybe someone was hurt. Maybe there had been an accident. Margaret grabbed her robe and slowly stepped into the hallway. The house smelled strange. Metallic, sharp, like rust, or pennies soaked in water. The hallway lights were off, but faint moonlight from the staircase illuminated part of the living room below. And that's when she saw him, Tyler, standing completely still near the kitchen entrance, soaked from the rain, breathing heavily, wearing black gloves. His clothes were stained dark, and beside him was a large black garbage bag. Margaret stared at him in confusion. Tyler? He immediately turned, and for a split second, his face looked terrified. Not angry, not surprised. Terrified, like he had just been caught doing something unimaginable. "Mom," he whispered quickly, "go back upstairs." Margaret looked down at the garbage bag. Something inside it shifted, very slightly. Her heart nearly stopped. "Tyler, what is that?" "Nothing." But his voice cracked when he said it. Margaret slowly stepped down another stair, then another. The metallic smell grew stronger, much stronger, and suddenly a dark liquid touched the edge of the kitchen tile, leaking from the bag. Margaret's breathing stopped. "No!" Tyler immediately stepped in front of it. "Mom, stop!" But now she could see his hands shaking violently, his chest rising too fast, panic in his eyes. The kind of panic people have when reality is collapsing around them. "Tyler," her voice trembled. "What did you do?" For several seconds, he said nothing. Rain hammered against the windows. Thunder shook the house. And Tyler simply stood there staring at his mother, like a child who wanted someone to wake him from a nightmare. Then finally, he whispered, "It was an accident." Margaret's knees nearly gave out. "What accident?" Tyler looked away, and that's when she noticed something horrifying near the edge of the bag. Human fingers. Margaret screamed. A scream so loud it echoed through the entire house. She stumbled backward against the staircase while Tyler rushed toward her. Mom, listen to me." But Margaret shoved him away violently. "Oh my God! Oh my God!" She stared at the bag in complete horror. Human fingers. Pale. Motionless. Covered in blood. Tyler immediately began crying. Actual tears. Not fake emotion. Real panic. Real collapse. "You don't understand," he shouted. "I didn't mean for this to happen." Margaret's entire body trembled uncontrollably. "Who is that?" Tyler looked frozen, then finally whispered. His name was Daniel. The room went silent. Margaret felt like the oxygen had vanished from the house. Tyler covered his face, and that single movement told her everything. Her son had killed someone, but what terrified her most was what came next, because Tyler suddenly looked toward the basement door, as if he was worried about something else, or someone else. Margaret noticed immediately. "Tyler," her voice dropped. "What's in the basement?" He didn't answer. Instead, he began shaking harder. And suddenly Margaret realized something horrifying. The garbage bag beside him wasn't the only one. There were more, near the basement stairs. 3 of them, and one appeared much larger than the others. Margaret's entire body went cold. "No!" Tyler started sobbing now. I panicked. Margaret slowly backed away from him. Every maternal instinct she had battled against pure terror, because standing in front of her was no longer the little boy she raised. This was someone else, someone she no longer recognized. "You need to call the police," she whispered. Tyler immediately snapped his head upward. No, the way he said it chilled her blood. Not emotional, not scared. Cold, sharp, instant. Margaret took another step backward. Tyler moved closer. "Mom, please." His voice lowered. "If you call them, my life is over." Margaret couldn't even process what she was hearing. "My life." She pointed toward the garbage bags. "Someone is dead." Tyler began pacing frantically. "You don't understand what happened." "Then explain it." He stopped moving. For several seconds, nothing. Then finally he whispered, "He was blackmailing me." Margaret frowned in confusion. "What?" Tyler wiped tears from his face. "I met him online months ago." His breathing became uneven again. He found out about the money. "What money?" Tyler looked terrified. Real terror. The kind people feel when secrets buried too deep suddenly rise to the surface. And then he said something Margaret would never forget for the rest of her life. He knew what happened to Dad. Everything stopped. Margaret felt her heart skip. Tyler's father had supposedly died in a boating accident 8 years earlier. Authorities ruled it accidental. No investigation. No suspicion. Nothing. Margaret stared at her son. Slowly. Carefully. "What did you just say?" Tyler immediately realized his mistake. But it was too late. Margaret's breathing became shallow again. "Tyler." He backed away. "Mom." "What happened to your father?" Tyler looked trapped, cornered, like his entire world was collapsing in real time. Then suddenly, the basement made a noise. A loud bang. Margaret jumped violently. Both of them turned toward the basement door. Another bang echoed upward. Margaret's eyes widened. Someone was down there, alive. Tyler's face drained completely of color. "No!" Another bang, this time followed by a muffled scream. Margaret covered her mouth in horror. Tyler rushed toward the basement door, but Margaret grabbed his arm. "Who is down there?" Tyler looked completely shattered now, and for the first time that night, Margaret saw something even more terrifying than panic in her son's eyes. Fear. Not fear of prison. Fear of whoever was in that basement. Another scream echoed upward, and then a voice, weak, barely audible. "Help me." Margaret froze. Tyler slowly turned toward her. Tears streamed down his face, and in a trembling whisper, he said, "Mom, you need to leave the house. Right now." But before Margaret could respond, the basement door knob slowly began to turn, and someone on the other side was trying to come out. The basement door knob twisted slowly. Once, twice, then violently. Margaret stumbled backward in terror as the weak voice behind the door cried again, "Please help." Tyler rushed forward instantly, bracing both hands against the basement door. "Stay back," he shouted. The person below began pounding harder now. Each bang echoed through the entire house. Margaret could barely breathe. There was someone alive inside her basement, and her son was trying to keep them trapped there. "Tyler," she whispered in horror. "What have you done?" Tyler looked completely broken. Rain crashed outside, while thunder rattled windows. The entire house felt like it was collapsing under weight of secrets that should never have existed. "I can explain," Tyler said desperately. But Margaret shook her head violently. No, this isn't real." Another scream came from downstairs. "Please." Margaret instantly tried to rush toward the basement door, but Tyler grabbed her arm. "Mom, don't." For one terrifying moment, Margaret saw pure panic explode across his face. Not anger, not evil, fear, as if whatever was in that basement terrified him too, and that frightened her even more. "Move," she screamed. Tyler tightened his grip. "You don't understand." Margaret slapped him hard across the face. The sound echoed through the hallway. Tyler released her immediately. Margaret yanked the basement door open. Cold air rushed upward from the darkness below, and then she saw it. Blood, smears across the wooden stairs. Fresh, leading downward into complete darkness. The smell was overwhelming now. Rot, bleach, blood. Margaret nearly gagged. At the bottom of the stairs, a weak figure crawled across the basement floor. A young woman, barely alive. Her wrists were bound with duct tape. One side of her face bruised badly. And beside her, Margaret noticed cameras, tripods, plastic sheets, and several phones scattered across the table. The basement looked less like a storage room and more like a crime scene. The woman looked upward weakly. "Please." Margaret rushed downstairs instantly. Tyler followed behind her, breathing uncontrollably. The young woman clutched Margaret's robe desperately. "He killed Daniel." Margaret felt her stomach drop again. What happened here? The woman tried to speak through tears, but Tyler suddenly shouted, "Stop talking." The scream startled everyone. Margaret turned toward him in disbelief. Tyler immediately broke down again, completely collapsing emotionally. "You weren't supposed to come here tonight," he whispered. The woman stared at him in horror. Margaret quickly untied the tape around her wrists. "What's your name?" "Rachel." Her voice trembled violently. Margaret helped her sit upright, while Tyler paced upstairs like someone losing his mind. He said Daniel was blackmailing him. Margaret said softly. Rachel looked confused, then suddenly terrified. "That's not true." Margaret froze. "What?" Rachel swallowed hard. Daniel wasn't blackmailing him. She looked toward Tyler. He was trying to expose him. The room went silent. Tyler stopped pacing upstairs. Margaret slowly turned toward the staircase. "Expose what?" Tyler didn't answer. Rachel began crying. For years, Tyler's been pretending online to be someone else. Margaret frowned. "What are you talking about?" Rachel pointed weakly toward the phone scattered around the basement. "He records people." Margaret stared at the equipment, confused. Then horrified realization slowly spread across her face. "No!" Rachel nodded through tears. "He tricks people into meeting him." Margaret's heart pounded violently now. "No!" "He blackmails them, threatens them, records them." Tyler suddenly screamed from upstairs. "Shut up!" Margaret flinched, but Rachel kept talking. Daniel found out. Margaret slowly looked upward toward her son, the boy she raised, the child she protected, the teenager she comforted after nightmares. And suddenly, none of it felt real anymore. Rachel's voice cracked. Daniel said he was going to police. Tyler slowly walked down the basement stairs now, step by step, looking completely hollow inside. "I didn't mean to kill him." Margaret stared at him with tears forming in her eyes. Tyler's hands shook violently. "He attacked me first." Rachel shook her head immediately. "No, he didn't. He grabbed me. You stabbed him." Margaret covered her mouth. Tyler looked completely shattered. I panicked. Rachel pointed toward the garbage bags upstairs. "You cut him apart." Tyler suddenly collapsed onto the basement stairs, sobbing uncontrollably. I didn't know what to do. Margaret could barely recognize his voice anymore. Everything felt distorted, like a nightmare refusing to end. Then Tyler looked toward his mother and quietly said something that destroyed her completely. "I tried to stop being like this." Margaret stared at him silently. Tyler wiped tears from his face. "I tried for years." Rain hammered outside harder now. Thunder shook the house again. Tyler looked toward the basement floor. "When Dad died..." Margaret froze. Tyler's voice trembled. "He found out what I was doing online." Margaret's entire body went cold. He threatened to turn me in. No, she whispered. Tyler looked up slowly. We fought on the boat. Margaret backed away instantly. No. Tyler's face collapsed. I pushed him. Silence. Complete silence. Margaret felt her knees weaken. For 8 years, she had mourned her husband, believed he died in an accident, cried over a lie. Tyler began sobbing harder now. I didn't mean for him to fall. Margaret couldn't breathe. Every memory shattered inside her head at once. Birthday dinners, family vacations, Christmas mornings. All poison now. You killed your father. Tyler shook uncontrollably. I was scared. Margaret looked at him with absolute heartbreak. No. Tears streamed down her face. You let me bury him thinking it was an accident. Tyler couldn't even look at her anymore. Rachel quietly whispered. He said nobody would ever believe him. Margaret slowly realized something horrifying. This wasn't Tyler's first victim. Maybe not even his second. Her eyes drifted toward the cameras, the phones, the plastic sheets. And suddenly she understood why Tyler looked terrified earlier. Not because he got caught, because the truth was finally over. Sirens suddenly echoed faintly outside. Tyler looked upward instantly. Rachel grabbed Margaret's arm. I called 911 when he left Daniel's apartment. Tyler's breathing stopped. Blue and red lights flashed through the rain outside moments later. Margaret closed her eyes. It was over. Tyler slowly stood up from the stairs. For a brief second, he looked like a frightened little boy again. Broken, lost, human, and somehow that made everything even sadder. Mom, he whispered. Margaret looked at him through tears. Tyler's voice cracked completely. I'm sorry, but some apologies arrived too late. Police stormed into the house, seconds later shouting commands. Tyler didn't resist, didn't run, didn't fight. He simply stood there crying while officers handcuffed him beneath the flashing lights. Margaret watched silently from the basement stairs, her entire world destroyed in a single night as police escorted Tyler away. He looked back at her one final time, and Margaret realized something deeply horrifying. Evil does not always look evil. Sometimes it looks familiar. Sometimes it eats dinner beside you. Sometimes it calls you mom. And sometimes you never truly know the darkness someone is hiding until it's far too late. In the weeks that followed, investigators uncovered years of manipulation, hidden recordings, fake online identities, and multiple victims terrified to come forward. The story shocked the entire country. Neighbors described Tyler as quiet, polite, normal, but behind closed doors, a completely different person existed. Margaret never returned to that house again. And according to investigators, she never visited Tyler once after the arrest, because some betrayals cut deeper than grief itself, and some truths destroy families forever. So before this story ends, there's something every viewer needs to remember. Pay attention to the people around you. Not everyone hiding pain is dangerous, but silence, manipulation, obsession, secret online lives, uncontrolled anger, and emotional isolation can slowly become something deadly when ignored for too long. Real danger often grows quietly, behind smiles, behind locked doors, behind people nobody suspects. If someone you love begins changing drastically, if they become emotionally unstable, secretive, consumed by rage, or disconnected from reality, do not ignore it. Speak up. Get help. Protect yourself and others before a situation becomes irreversible. Because sometimes the scariest monsters are not strangers hiding in the dark. Sometimes they're the people we trust the most.